Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name's Ken Marr and here I'm posting free Linux tutorials, videos most with PDF notes. The ad hoc channel, I've done 3 tutorials so far. That's the G-Party one I just posted. On the introduction today we'll be looking at section 2, commands and concepts of the Linux command line for beginners and Windows users. If you have any questions you can mail me at linux@kenmarr.fastmail.net, and I'll also be talking about iDrive, Dropbox and DigitalOcean today. Just before we move on and start though, can I just say a plea? It would be a great help to me if you could help me build my YouTube channel, and the way you do this is watch the videos, but it also helps, and the way they build it is if I get likes or unlikes and comments. A single word will do. You can put brilliant or rubbish on the videos, and if you make a comment then I can try and improve them. Do subscribe to the channel. If you subscribe to the channel, you'll get notifications of new posts, and that helps develop my channel as well. As I said, I'll explain about iDrive and Dropbox. If you like and intend to use them, both are free. Please email me first so that I can email them with a referral with your email address, and then they send me goodies like free space. You can do the same thing. If you want to send feedback, ask questions or make suggestions for new posts, that's best done via email rather than on Facebook. There's them, and you could please recommend me to colleagues or other users on Facebook. So we're starting today with commands and concepts. This is the PDF file. If you've seen section 0 and 1, you'll be familiar with the format and where it is. If you haven't seen those 2 sections and you're here at section 2, you should go back and look at section 0 and section 1, because that helps you set up things that we use during the course. And on the course what we looked at using was my iDrive, where the files are. In the classroom you'll find introduction. Introduction is section 2, which are today's notes. But the best way to look at them is to download them and save them as a PDF file and view it. The YouTube videos, which are here, there are 3 ad hoc ones so far and 2 sections to this course. If you're going to watch a video, I'll just show you where you put what I want you to put. So if we open a new tab and paste the video, there's the video for section 0, and down here what I'd like you to do is tick like or unlike, and also put a 1-word comment down here. More would be nice, you know, so I know how it's going. You know, the sound's terrible, the pace is too slow, the pace is too quick, you don't like the content, all sorts of things you could put there, and that would be a big help. So that's my gripes over. Now I'm running this in different terminals. Before I open the terminals though, the objectives for this section are to display processes running on the system, describe the directory structure, display files and directories, describe and use the concepts of piping and redirection, and use the switch user commands. Now we've been running it in, some of us I assume are running in VirtualBox. I'd like to know actually if you comment, are you using VirtualBox? Are you using your own Linux box to do this? There's VirtualBox, the user CanM with the files that we're using. That's one way of doing it. Another way is to open a terminal on your own machine. Linux Mint. VirtualBox was running CentOS 8, here on Linux Mint I've got the same files in the same user. You could actually run it on Termux on your mobile phone if you want to. I found a new way to run it last night. The other icon on there that I mentioned was DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean hosts cloud services. So what I did yesterday, I went online and I signed up to them. This is their website. Logged in, signed up, and within 5 minutes I created what they call a droplet. And then if you click on more, you can open an access console to the droplet. I logged in as root, created my own user, so I now have a user called KDM with a simple password because we're only training, and the same files that Control and L clears the screen, the same files that we're looking at. It's interesting though, the differences are interesting. The files don't come up there in colour. If you're looking at Mint here, they do come up in colour. If I'm looking at, I've been clever here, I can get Mint back down there. Here, if I'm looking at them in Centos, they come up in colour as well. And the reason for that I'll explain later on in the next section, I think. Now, if you want to install things on here, let me show you what you might want to install. I put on here Fetch. It's a neat little app that shows you what's running. So we're running Ubuntu, it was 18.4. On here we're running CentOS 8. And on here, on my machine, I think 3 is enough, I'm getting confused. Linux Mint. Everything we're doing should work. 99% exactly the same. So you can use which one you like. In fact, I'm thinking of running this. If you sign up to DigitalOcean, you get $100 free credit for a month. But they're only charging me $6 a month to run a droplet like this. The other thing you can do is import your own virtual machines, but for training purposes it's very simple to set up. So what I could do is set up a couple of 100 users in there and people could log in here. That would save you bothering with VirtualBox or putting files on your own machine. I'll see, I might do that. For now I'm going to log out. It remembers where you are when you come back to it, and you can open it on the mobile phone as well, which is neat. So this is Mint, so we'll be using that, and I'll be using CentOS as well. So we'll start here. So processes and files. On Linux servers, something is either a file or a process. So processes are running programs, friendly daemons, such as the default shell. You can find your default shell by typing ps. There's my shell running. There's the ps that I just ran. There's the command over here. If we turn that on, which I like, I can highlight things. So I like doing that. There we go. However, that's only showing what's running in this session. If you want to see what's running for your own user, which isn't there but is in the notes somewhere else, I think, you can do -u username and you get a lot more output because I'm running a lot more stuff as KDM or KenM, I beg your pardon. If you want to see everything that's running, you can do ps aux, or as I've done over here, I'm in the habit of doing ps -ef. It's the same thing really. So these are all the processes running in background on the machine. There are always lots of processes. If you scroll up, what it tells you at the top is the user ID. So root owns the process with a process ID of 1, which didn't have a parent because it was the first thing that happened. And it runs something called systemd. We'll go into that if you get as far as the admin course. And then processes kick off other processes. Process 2 picked off, and then process 2 was the parent of all these processes down as far as there, when process 1 kicks some more off. So it's processes kicking off processes. You get CPU time and the name of the process. Now if it's not a process, it's probably a file. But the thing to bear in mind is that lots of things on Linux are treated as files. So you've got simple files, text and binary files. The files we've got some simple text files like Linux a day file. We've got directories like scr and temp. And we've got that file which has come up in green, and that one. Now they're different to the others. If you look at their permissions, they've got an X. They're files with an X in their permissions. Directories normally have an X in their permissions. If a file's got an X in the permissions, then chances are it's supposed to be executable. It might be there by mistake. So you might find it's a shell script or a binary file. So directories are treated as special files which contain other files and directories, but anything attached to the machine is a file. So attached devices or peripherals, printers, disk drives, keyboards or the terminal, they're all treated like files. One thing to remember is you can put any characters including spaces in a file, but that's not recommended. I never put spaces in file names, even on Windows. If you want to create a file, see if I catch a file called Red Hat, what I'll get is 2 files, Red and Hat. If I want a file called Red Hat, I mean you can do it with spaces in, but you don't want to. If I did want a file called Red Hat, several ways of doing it. One is sometimes people put an underscore. Ooh, sorry, I pressed the wrong key there. Sometimes people put an underscore, Red Hat, or they call it Red Hat. Sorry, Hat. Why is that going uppercase? Because I'm pressing the wrong key. No, I'm not. That's weird. Yes, I am. Beg your pardon. It's a bit dark in here, I can't see what I'm doing. So I've now got files called Red and Hat. Red Hat with an underscore and Red Hat with a capital H. Should have had a capital H and a capital R, but it doesn't mind. You get the idea. All touch does is creates an empty file. It just touches you an empty file. So all these files that I've created I don't want. They're just empty files. They have a size of 0. So restrict yourself, I recommend, to numbers, letters, full stop and underscore. You can't go wrong. Now we're using the ls command here to list our files. ls by default shows you the files in the current directory. However, directories may also be listed. So what is a hierarchical file system? Hierarchy at the top is the root directory, which is designated by a backslash. Sorry, forward slash, beg your pardon. A forward slash. And that contains all other directories and files on the system. You can list it, which is down here, with ls space forward slash. And you'll see that most things there are directories. Some of them are links. This one and this one, you can tell by their colour because they're in sort of cyan, and that one. They are links. I think that's a special file. All these blue ones are directories. The green ones are special. If we do an ls-l on root and we examine the permissions, you'll see that the green two, backup and temp, have got a T where normally you would see an X. What that means is that anyone can write to those directories. So you can store backup files in backup, but you can only delete your own files, and that's what it's used for. So temp is there for temporary storing files, but you can only delete your own files. Backup's there for storing backups. These are links. As I said, they point somewhere else, like an open door. I read somewhere in a book. The others are directories. I'm not sure what that one is. That's something special. System solve. Now, you can do an ls on any of the directories under root. So for instance, root looks like that. I can do an ls/etc. Scrolls off the screen. We'll fix that later on. I can do an ls-l if you want full details on a directory /dev. It's interesting, this one actually, because if you look at the first character, now first character is normally a D for a directory, an L for a link, or a hyphen for a flat file. But what you've got here is lots of C's and B's. A C, if you remember from the last section of notes, is a character device, like a terminal. A B is a block device, like a disk drive. Now you're getting color output on here. When you do your files, and blue tells you it's a directory, cyan tells you it's a link, and green tells you it's a executable file. We don't have any links in there. I thought I did have a link actually. Let's have a look in here. No, there's no links in there either. Never mind, we'll come to links later on. Yeah, back here. I don't know if I can go back that far. When I did an ls-l on etc, or was it dev? It doesn't matter. Either will do. These are links pointing somewhere. Now there are loads of options with ls. Do you remember we looked at the man pages for ls? In some versions I've seen it have the whole of the alphabet in there and mix an uppercase, or an uppercase, I beg your pardon. So there's lots of options that you can pass the else commands. Here are some that I like. ls-lh. If you do an ls-l, what it tells you there is in bytes. But if you do an ls-lh, H quite often stands for human readable. Excuse me, I'm just putting a lamp on, it's getting a bit dark. It's about 5 o'clock on the snow. It's 5:45 actually on a Sunday afternoon. Here you get them in human readable form. So here that one's there in kilobytes, which is nice, especially if they're bigger files. You can also do ls-r. Now what that does is recursively lists all the files below this level. So if you did it like that, it would list every file on the machine. Not a good idea. But if I do it like that, it will recursively list all the files here. So it will show me all the files in SCR and all the files in temp, like that. So there are the files listed, and then SCR is a directory which contains all these files. Bin in SCR is a directory which contains these files. Temp is a directory, it contains these files. Oh sorry, that's temp in SCR, and there's also a temp at the upper level which contains all these files. These are files that I use for setting up the users that we're using. They're also used on the shell scripting course and for some of the exercises. So you might want to freeze the video, try out some of the commands. That's a simple exercise. So I won't stop there, I'll just carry on and we'll look at the directory entry. Now when you, just to prove this works elsewhere as well, let's go into Mint and do something in Mint. There we go. Right, when you do an ls-l, here you can see the entry for temp. So suppose you wanted to see the permissions, the owner, the group, date updated for temp. What you could attempt to do is do an ls-l on temp. And what that does, the default for ls is if it's a directory, it prints all the files in the directory. So it doesn't show you information about temp that's there. It shows you all the files in temp. And the way around that is if you want to see the directory entry itself, put a D. And that shows you the directory entry. And that's there on page 6. This is a directory structure. I'm not going to go through it all. And there's more at the end of this section as well if you're really interested. Loads on the internet. If you do an ls on root, you'll find all these directories are here. Some important ones from a user's point of view. I mean things like lib, usr, sbin, bin and usr. They contain software. That's got boot files in it. That's if you're going to run a CD-ROM. Dev is for devices. etc contains a lot of text configuration files. There's no registry on Linux. It's not like using Windows. And most configuration files, our files are in home. So any users you've got, if you do an ls/home, you'll see their home directories. So on here I've only got the 2 users, KDM and KenM. But if you go back to Centos and do an ls/home, there are several users on here, KDM and KenM. Then you've got train 1, train 2, train A, train X, user 1 and user 2. So directories listed there. Let's look at files. There is only one command for displaying directories, ls, but there are loads of commands for. Now we'll look at some of them. The simplest is cat, which is short for concatenate, which means to join together. We'll see why in a moment. Now if you're catting a file, it's best to use it on small files because of how it works. And also if you cat multiple files, like I could say cat by and people, we don't see the join. I mean, I can see the join. That's what's in the by file. That's what's in the people file. So that's one drawback. It's fine for small files, but if you cat a large file, or not a very large file, but bigger than screenful, like Linux, it scrolls off the screen. So you've got to go up to find the top of what you're looking for. But it does have its uses. One neat thing I learned recently is that if you do cat with -vet, it will show you tab characters, spaces, and put a $sign at the end of the line. So I did a cat people there. But if I do that again, but I pass the arguments -v for verbose, I suppose, et, I can't remember what they stand for. You can look them up with the man pages. There you'll see that these here are tabs. control, the control key is designated by the little hat symbol over the 6. Control and I is a tab. So there's a tab there, there's a tab there, and some of these have got spaces on the end of the line because the dollar marks the end of the line. So that's quite useful. Now, if you're looking at large files like Linux or large-ish files, cat's not the best way. A better way is to use less. Although there are other commands you might have seen like more and PG. I use less, which is a more modern version of more. The joke is less is more. There are more things in the less command than the more command. Now if you say less on by and people, what happens this time is displays the by file, and if you want to go to the next one, what you do is you type :n. I mean, pressing return doesn't help. It's colon, the cursor drops down, n. We're in the next file. :n, there isn't a next file, that's the people file. So we're at the end. To get out, you press Q. The difference between less and more is if you do more, you've still got to do, oh no, you can go straight into people like that till you get to the end, and then it comes out and you're out of it. Now this is really useful if you're looking at a large file like Linux. I'll show you the difference. If I do a more on Linux, I can do all the things it says here, like searching, for instance, the same as we did in the man pages. This is so I'm more. I can go down a line with return. I can go down a page with a space bar. No, not a page there, you idiot. Sorry, I'll move the cursor. Down a page with the space bar, which is that one. I can go forward and backwards with F and B. So actually, more, when more gets to the bottom, it falls out. So I could go forward till I get to the bottom. Oh dear. And back with B. And I can search. Now the way you search in a lot of Linux utilities is to type a / which appears at the bottom of the screen, and then you type what you're searching for. By default, it's case sensitive. Now it's found Linux in there, but it's not obvious where. Now let's look at the difference. It's also more doesn't clear the screen. If we do less on Linux, there are subtle differences. One is, if you press the F key, when you get to the bottom it stops. You can go back again. Also, you can use the arrow keys to scroll up and down, which you can't do in more. And if you search, it highlights the text. And you find the next occurrence with N, previous occurrence with uppercase N. So if we're up here somewhere, and I go N, 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 it will go through looking for Linux, and then if I do Shift and N, it goes back looking for it. And then when you quit, clears the screen. So I use less for looking at large files, cat for looking at little files. Associated commands, there's more. There's also tac and zcat. What do you suppose tac does? Cat, people, tac, people. Have you guessed? Does it backwards? Not backwards across, but backwards up and down. So J Smith comes last now. And zcat is for looking at zipped files without having to bother to unzip them, which is rather neat. Now, like I said, there are lots of commands for looking at files. This one I like. This is for counting files. If you do a WC word count on Linux, not what you think it was, it contains 1278 words, a word delineated by things like a comma, a full stop, a colon, semicolon, space, and 7,348 characters. If you just want to see the lines, C for characters, minus W for words, minus L for lines. So it's got 118 lines. You can also number files. So we could number people. Numbers it on the screen, doesn't make any changes to the file. We could also number Linux, which you remember has got 118 lines. Thing is, it says it's only got 102 lines. Now, why is that, I wonder? See, even in the classroom I'd be asking you, but it's alright, you get away without answering questions. The answer is, it doesn't number the blank lines unless you tell it to. You tell it to with minus BA. Now it's got 118 lines. There is an exercise coming up somewhere where you can try all this sort of stuff when we've done a bit of piping and redirection. There it is. But another command first. The file command. This is useful. It tells you the type of a file. Now, I can cat Linux. That's fine. It's a text file. But what happens if I cat nice? Now, there's a clue here. When I do an ls, nice comes up in green. Which, if I thought about it, that gives me a clue. It might be a text shell script, but it might be a binary file. And if I cat a binary file, what I get is that. Now, in olden times, this would lock your terminal up so you couldn't carry on. I think it's quite funny when it does that. It hasn't done it here. Let's see if it does it in here. No, it didn't do it there either. I've seen it do this and change the prompt and the commands into sort of gobbledygook. If it does do that, you can get out of it by using reset. But what this teaches you is what we should have done, go back to, is found out what type of file nice was before we catted it. You can do that with the file command. Linux is ASCII text. Nice is a 64-bit shared object. It's an executable file. Like I said, the clue was in the permissions, the X there, and the fact that it comes up in green, which is because there's an X there. So that's looking at files. There are more commands for looking at files in a moment, like head and tail, for instance. But before we do that, let's look at piping and redirection. Now, piping is very useful. It's really annoying when you do an ls-l on something like dev, and it scrolls off the screen because you've then got to go back up to try and find what you wanted to see. And in fact, yeah, up to the top, you might well have lost the top. Same if you cat Linux. Scrolls off the screen. Obviously you can use less to get around that, but you want something that does a similar thing for the ls-l. And the something that does that is piping. And what happens with the pipe is you send a command's output into another command and perhaps into another command. The pipe symbol is the vertical line which is normally next to the Z key. Well, it is on the UK keyboard. Now, as an example of how you might use ls-l on a directory again, actually doing etc in the notes, but it doesn't make any difference. One way of holding that on the screen, since we know that less holds its output on the screen, what we could do is pipe it into less. Now, in the notes, I've put spaces around the pipe. That's just so you can see it. You don't need to put spaces around. You can if you want to, but there is no need to put spaces around the pipe. And what that does, it displays the etc directory, pipes it into ls, and I can do down arrow. I can go forward, backwards, forward to the bottom, come back again, and I can search for CA, which is there, and find the next occurrences of CA if there are any. Now you can do this with any commands except ones which prompt for an answer. I think that might cause a problem. So yesterday, quit to come out of less. Yesterday we did the tree command, which gives you a hierarchy of directories and files in directories. You can pipe tree into less. And then go down and up, through and about. Did we do man minus k? I can't remember. The man command, do you remember, shows you details about a command. It's the manual pages. If you don't know what the command's called, but you've got an idea what it does, you can do things like man minus k edit, or in the example there, list. And what this does is it shows you all the commands with list somewhere in their description. And there's quite a lot of them. So you could pipe that into less and hold the output on the screen. Okay. Up and down with the arrow keys, or forwards and backwards if you want to, Q to quit. If it doesn't work, you might have to run the command mandb, create the man database -c as the super user. So you prefix that with sudo. If you don't know about sudo, I'll explain about it in a minute, the notes, but it allows you to run commands as root in effect. And you can't install things unless you're root. But if you did that and then you ran this, that would work. I think it works on both that one and that one. Man minus k list piped into less. Yes. Normally mandb is already there. Now that's one thing you can do in the command line, which is used a lot, piping. The other is redirection. Now it's all very well doing an ls-l on dev. It all goes off the screen. You can save it in effect and plow through it by piping that into less, as I just did. So we can go down and up. But suppose you want to save it, because when you quit now it's gone. Now one way of saving it, that's better. One way of saving it is to redirect it into a file. You do redirection, sorry, press the wrong key there, is to redirect it into a file. You do redirection with greater than. So coming back over here, I'll stop saying so. Piping is a command into a command into a command. You can do that many times, or several times. Redirection is a command redirected with greater than into a file. and just make up a file name like dev file, as I've done there. Now, I won't see anything on the screen this time. What'll happen is it all goes into dev file. There it is, and I can view it with less. It's not a, this is just Centos being ultra helpful. It's not a binary file. We know it's not because we just created it. I don't know why it thinks that. Now we can see it like that. Now, as well as using a greater than, you can use two greater thans. You can also use a less than and two less thans. They're covered later. Now we'll look at two greater thans. Two greater thans allows you to append to a file. Now what I should have said back here but didn't is that if you do this with a greater than, the file will be created if it doesn't exist and overwritten if it does. You have to use it with care because it will overwrite the output file if it exists. Two greater thans, different. This creates the file if it doesn't exist, but appends to the file if it does. And the syntax is to use two greater thans. Now, I've got my file, dev file. If I catch it, just so I can see the end, the last thing is 0. Now I can echo text to the screen. Remember we did echo end of file. I could do that again. Now if I put one greater than dev file, what will happen? It will overwrite the file and the file will just contain the one line end of file. But if I put two greater thans, it will append to the end of the file. And I can view the end of a file. Actually, there's a command coming up called tail. If I tail dev file, it's on the next page I think, then 10 lines of the file by default including end of file. So that's been appended to the end of the file. Okay. I'm going to clear that, shrink that. I'm actually going to pause the video. I find it easier when you're doing this sort of thing. If the videos are long and you make a mistake, you don't want to be going back and re-recording the whole thing. So what I do is record them in chunks and then join them together, which is dead easy, something I'm going to do a post on. So if I leave a screen like that, and here I will say Figlet exercise, something easier to find in the video. If that's on the screen, you'll know we're doing an exercise. So I'll leave you with the exercise. Have a go at the exercise, pause the video, have a go at the exercise. When you start the video up again, I'll put a solution on the screen. Right, welcome back. I assume you've done the exercises now. So let's look at the answers here. I'm using something different. This is a terminal called Gawk, like Quake but with a G. G-U-A-K-E, terminal. It's persistence across all your workspaces, and you open it with, by default, the F12 key. So it closes, it opens on S12. I can make it go down there to get back. Well, I've lost here. And what I've got here is I've split the screen. So you can split the screen that way. I've got 3 screens, or you can split the screen that way. So I've got 3 screens that way. It's very nice. And you can customize it. Preferences here. Fiddle about with the sizings, height and width and displacement. That's what I did. And you get it back with F12. I don't know why, but when I try and make it go up and down, it goes sideways for some reason. You get there eventually. There we go. So, the exercise solutions. Use the commands cat and less to view the file log file. So cat log file, less log file. Use the command nl. Count how many lines there are in the file log file. wc-l log file. Use the command nl to produce a numbered list of log file including blank lines. nl-ba log file. Number 2, a long listing of USR bin. A long listing with it held on the screen. Pipe that into less. Similarly with ps-ef, pipe into less will hold it on the screen. Redirected will save it in a file. Now you can do the same thing with who and save the output from who in a file. You can move these up and down actually, which is nice because I can hide the next exercise. There we are. So pat yourselves on the back if you got that right, and we'll move on to the next bit. Cat. Cat is short for concatenate, which means joining things together. So you can use it to join files, concatenate them. If I copy that and paste it here, let's close the bottom screen. Oops. Quit from that, close, paste here. So I'm catting by, old file and people. So I get the output from those 3 files. I want to save that in a file, just redirect the output to new file. Then cat new file. There's my output in a new file. But you might want to save your file to a different directory, provided permissions allow. For example, come back over here, I have the directory temp. I could run the cat and put new file in temp, like that. There is there. And I could cat it. To cat it. Oh, sorry, in the wrong window. To cat it, I would say cat. Give it the full address, which is temp / new file, because temp's in the directory I'm in. No / before temp. New file. Now the other thing you might want to do is put it in a system directory, and the obvious system directory to put things in, if you've access to nothing else, is temp. It's unfortunate that I named my directory temp, and there is under root a directory called temp. Leads to a bit of confusion. Remember, the green colour on temp means that anyone can write to that directory. So I can rewrite my cat here. Now it's not temp because I don't have a directory called temp. It's under root, so it's /temp, and then I can cat that file /temp, and that's got new file in it. So be aware that when you're using files in your directory, directories or files, you don't need a slash in front of them, especially directories, but if you're looking at system directories, you probably need to use a full path. Tail. You can also look at files with head and tail. If you remember, at the end of, well, actually, I'm using a different laptop now because I had a bit of a problem with the sound on the other one. So I don't have a dev file. But what that shows you is the last 10 lines of dev file. Now dev file was simply created by doing an ls-l on dev and redirecting the output to dev file. If I cat the file, you can see the end of the file. Remember, the other one has 0 on the end. And then I added something to the end by saying echo end of file, 2 greater thans to append to the end of the file, file name. Now to see the end of the file, I can just say tail dev file. If you only want to see a number of lines, you can put a number minus a number after tail. There we go. And you just see 2 lines. One of the clever things you can do with tail is follow a file. For instance, if I split the screen here, actually I shouldn't be doing that because you can't do that, can you? Okay, I'll show you a way to do it in what you're using. Stop it. Cat's nibbling me because he's hungry. She's hungry. Go away. I'm busy. Let's go back to this one. Although it'll work just the same if you're using Centos. Here we can open a new tab. Now I've got a tab there in my login and a tab there in CanM. So here I can switch user to CanM. We'll do switch user in a minute. You won't need to do it, hopefully. And I've got 2 now. What we're going to do, oops, sorry, is we're going to run this script, scr follow. scr, no slash because it's in my directory. Now it doesn't appear to do anything, it is running though. I go back to the other terminal and do an ls, and you should have a file called follow me. All this does is produce a counter. If you tail follow me, you'll see it's got a number in it, 592, 590. It's counting down in seconds. Now what you can do that's clever is you can follow it. If you use tail minus F like that, you can watch it change, which is neat. There it goes. Now you stop this tail using Control and C. And same thing with this terminal, you can stop scr follow by typing Control and C, which interrupts the job. I think we did that, didn't we? Yes, we did. As well as tail, you've got head. Head looks at the start of a display. So with head, you could say head -1 and look at the password file in etc. That's always there in Linux, so it's used quite a lot for examples on courses. And the first entry is always the administrator, the root user. If you want to see more than one line, just put a number, top 5 lines. If you want to see the actual logins that we're using, tail, the last 5 lines. There, I've got these logins, CanM, train1 to ANX. Now this is a neat command. This, the key command, combines redirection and piping. If you do an ls -l on the example, there is USR bin, goes off the screen. Now I could have saved it in the file. Well, I can do two things. I can pipe it into less, which holds it on the screen. I can go up and down and look at it, Q to quit. Or I could redirect the output into file 1, should we say. And then I can do a less on file 1. Cat sitting watching me, give me the evil eye now. Now you can combine both by using two pipes in a line like that. So to get it to scroll on the screen and save in a file, what you do your command. Instead of redirecting it though, you pipe it into T, into a file. So T puts it in a file, in T file, and then if you want to hold it on the screen, you pipe it into less. That's a more musical cat. Lots of cats here. Now I can go up and down the screen. It's one of the joys of working at home. But when I quit, do an ls, it's created a new file called T file. And if I do a less on T file, there's my output. That's neat. I like that one. Oh, just in passing here, you can do two files at once. So for instance, you could two files by saying two commands at once. I beg your pardon. It's getting late tonight. Should have finished this afternoon. Copy that. Highlight the text, but I promised I'd post it today. So what we're doing here is we're doing an ls -dev and sending it out to dev file, but we want to see the first line. So we combine the two commands with a semicolon. You can put as many commands as you like along a line, as long as they're separated by semicolons. There. Head gives you the top 10 lines by default. Right, switching users. Now, this be more difficult if you're using your own machine. If you haven't got another user on it, you can switch to. I'm going to do it in VirtualBox on Centos. Okay, if I tail etc password, I can see that this has the user CanM, there's my user, KDM. It's also got CanM and train1 to A and X. So using this, I can do the examples. So I'm logged in as CanM. Suppose I want to switch into the user train A. The way to do it is using a hyphen. SU space minus train A. I'll explain why you put the hyphen in a moment. The password for train A on here and train1 to an X is X. Now I'm in train A. Notice that the prompt's changed. If I do an ls, train A's got the same files as me, but they're in the FPT directory and they're owned by train A. And if I do an ID, I am in train A's user. To get back to your own user, exit, or easier, Control and D. Now to switch to root, you could do su minus root, but it assumes root if you don't put root in. And the root password on this machine is root 123. Now I've customized, because it's dangerous to be in root all the time, I've changed the prompt to appear in red. We're now in root, and there are roots files. Doesn't have many in there, but he owns them. They're in his group. Very colourful, aren't they? And again, to get back out, exit over here, or Control and D. Now, the reason I said use the hyphen is that you can switch user like that, but it's not the same and it's not recommended unless you know what you're doing. So, train A. Prompts the password, which is X. Type in ID. Yes, I am logged in as train A, but the difference is, if I do an ls-l, I'm still looking at my files, KenM's files. So if you don't put the hyphen in, it's not the same as logging in as that user. So I recommend switching user, always put the hyphen. Okay, Control and D gets me out. Now there's a special command which is like switch user, which we've been using, some of you probably know about, and that's called sudo. Sudo is useful if you want to run commands as root. Now at the beginning of this section I ran neofetch, which isn't in here. Now if I was going to install it on Ubuntu or Mint, I would use, or any Ubuntu based distribution, I would do sudo to say I want to assume, I'll tell you what, I'll do it this way. I would do apt install neofetch. If I was using Arch or Manjaro, I would say pacman. Whoops. Actually it's not in those, it's actually pacman minus s neofetch. And if I'm doing it on, I know this is confusing, but you know, that's how it is. If I was doing this on CentOS, you used to use yum, which was Yellow Dog Update Manager, but now you use DNF, which is practically the same as yum, and you say install, just like you would with apt. Now that won't work because it has to be run as root. To run it as root, you use sudo. The point about sudo is it asks for your password, not the root password. So I put in KenM's password. Hopefully it finds it. It will install it. Yes, we want to install the package. Now it says all that over here. In these examples we're looking at etc shadow, which is a privileged file. You can't look at that. You can if you use sudo. And it says most Linux distributions encourage quite sensibly the use of a non-privileged account while running the system, and the use of a utility like sudo when administrative privileges are needed. So the rule is don't log in as root. Log in as your own user, use sudo, or switch user into root if you need to. There we go, so we go back and run it. There we are. We're in CentOS. Pretty, isn't it? I'll leave you to read that if you want to. So a quick review of piping and redirection. Piping is a command to a command, optionally to another command. You've got to have two commands. Redirection, output to a file, Remember, it'll overwrite the file, create it if it's not there, 1 greater than. Append to a file, which adds to a file, creates it if it's not there, 2 greater thans. If you combine the two, the file name redirection goes at the end. You can't put that a pipe after you've redirected it. It's gone, effectively. Whoops, sorry. There we go. And that brings us to another exercise. So we'll do what I did before. So there's a mark in the video, and I suggest that you stop the video, do the exercise, come back, and I'll put up the answers. Okay, bye. Right, welcome back. I assume that now you've done the exercises, so look at the solutions. List the first 20 lines of the file, log file, head -20. Append a message end of file to the file, 2 greater thans because you're appending. View the last 15 lines, tail -15. List the files in the etc directory showing permissions, owner, group, date, time updated. ls -l. -l will give you those details. Now list the same files on the screen and save the output in a file called list file. So there, use T to create the list file and then pipe that into list to hold the output on the screen. Switch into a user like train A, list the files in there and exit to come back. The exercise solutions are all available, but I'd rather you try to do them yourself. We'll look at the exercise solutions later in the course. Right, this bit here, buy me a coffee. Let's go back to the screens. Let's shrink that. Okay, this is a word to prospective sponsors. Finally, in this section, there's a little bit more to do. If you're enjoying the course, I hope you are, but only if you can afford it, please consider making a small donation, $3, $1, towards the cost of development of my next 2 courses. I'll be doing shell scripting, which is probably another 10 sections, and administration, maybe another 10 sections after this course. To buy me a coffee, just click on the link in the PDF file. Should point out though that all my posts will continue to be freely available. I mean, you probably appreciate there's a lot of effort goes into doing this, especially as I've just bought and upgraded my microphone, only to find that the first part of the video for today, you might find the odd blip in there. I changed machines halfway through. I've gone from a 17-inch Sony Vaio to a 14-inch Lenovo IdeaPad. I don't know if you can see the join. They're pretty much the same. They both run Mint with the same setup. But the sound seems to work better on here than it did on the first part of the course. But I'll have a look to see if I can sort that out. Anyway, like I said, you can buy me a coffee by clicking on the link there. If I copy the link address, open a browser and type it in there, paste. There you go. You just choose what you want to paste and press support. It assumes you've got PayPal, but you can use a card if you want to. Like I said, only if you're enjoying the course and you can afford it. But it will be coming very handy towards, because my living died this year. The classroom training just went. There isn't any in England. There doesn't seem to be any Linux training in England at the moment. So I decided to do this for free. Now, just to finish off, there's a few little bits here. Process execution. let's go back to Centos. If yours is still locking, you can turn it off. You go into settings. Okay, whenever a command is entered at the prompt, it is the shell which interprets what's been typed, substituting appropriate values and or file names as necessary. Once the initial evaluation of a command is complete, the shell will attempt to find the command to be executed. It looks in two places. It first looks in the hash table. So if you've run the command before, it will find it in the hash table and run it more quickly. And then it looks in your path variable. Now, you can echo path. You'll just get the word path. If you want to see the variable, and most system variables in uppercase, put a dollar before it. Look at dollar path. Now what this is, it's a colon separated list of directories where it looks when you type a command, like ls for instance. If I say where is ls, ls is in /usr/bin, so it searched the path. It wasn't in local bin, it wasn't in bin, it's in usr bin, so it finds it. Now the point about this is sometimes you might try and find something and it's not there, like ifconfig for instance. What you'll find is that ifconfig here, it can't find. If I look on my own machine, it can find it. What it's used for is showing you your net mask and your IP address, and for setting them if. Now the reason that that works is if you do a where is ifconfig, it's in sbin, and in this user sbin is in my path somewhere. There it is. But if I go back to Centos here and I say where is ifconfig, it's in usr sbin, but usr sbin is not in my path, so I can't find it. Now there's two ways around that. One is you can complain to the administrator that your path doesn't have enough path names in it. The other is just give it full path name. So if that's where it thinks it is, if you type that in or copy and paste it, finds it. And there's a couple of more little things here before we finish off, because it's quite long this section. Part of a display. I like this. These bits at the end I didn't always used to do. What I used to do was at this point I would have heading that said self-study, because when you're doing a classroom course you're never sure how long it's going to take to get through the material, so you always have too much material. So these bits were for people to study at home. But I'll go through them. So this bit I like. This is part of a display. So let's look at people, the people file. It's only got 11 lines. If you display the first 8 lines of the file, which you can do by, well, you can do it several ways. You could do it like this: head -8 people. But I want to see line numbers. So the way to do that is to number the file and pipe it into head -8. So rather than having the file name at the end, you have the file name at the front. So there are the first 8 lines. Now, if you want to see lines 6 to 8 only, what you can do is find the first 8 lines and then display the last 3 lines. And that will give you lines 6, 7 and 8. And then once you've got it right, swap it round. Instead of doing NL people there, do head -8 people, tail -3, and you get Smythe, Jones and Evans, which are lines 6, 7 and 8. You can do an exactly similar thing with the Linux file. Remember that if you do an NL Linux, it doesn't number the blank lines, so you only get 102 lines. However, if you tell it to number the blank lines, it numbers them all. And then suppose you wanted to find lines 97 to 107. You could do it like that, and then swap things around. Now you can tell you got the right lines because you've got the line numbers, but then you swap it around again in the same way by heading the file there and taking that bit out. So we're expecting it to start with Linux today and end with reliability. There we go, starts with Linux today and ends with reliability. Neat. Two more things here. I'll just look at the last bit. The last few pages here are the directory structure. This is definitely for you to read yourself. So there's more details there on what's in all the system directories. That's the end, but the last thing before I leave you with that is scripting. People sometimes ask, or sometimes administrators want to know what people do when they log in, and you can find out by using the script command to a file name. So give it a file name like log, and then everything you do after that point until you do an exit appears in the log. So I could do several things there. I could do I could do who, I'll type it in. I could do who, semicolon. I could cat people. I could do a PS -EF. There's quite a lot of output. When you've finished, what script does is it forks a new shell, a new bash shell. A fork is when you have a shell below a shell. So to get back to your original shell, you can't see the shell there, you do an exit and then clear. Here it says script done, the file is logged, so it's saved the log file. So there we have the file log. If we now do a less on the file log, what you'll find is it's done the who command. There are the commands. If they'd been typed in individually, they would have appeared down the screen. There's the cat of people. There's the PS -EF. So you've got all the output from the session. That's the idea. And the last thing, I like this, is the no clobber option. If you want to prevent the overwriting of an existing file when you're using redirection greater than or two greater thans, you can set on no clobber. Don't clobber the file. Now you'd think to set it on you'd use +O, wouldn't you? But no, it's sorry, your voice is going. It's -O to set it on, -O, no clobber. Now if I echo, let's find a file I've got. I've got T file. No, never mind. I'll echo CLO BBR file out to, doesn't matter which file I use actually, old file. and it says you cannot overwrite the existing file. Does the same thing if you try and append to the file. What you'll find, hopefully, is that in the bash shell you can override that by using greater than pipe, like that. So I could hopefully, let's look at old file. I don't know if it works with append. Never tried that. Let's see if we can append. Oh, it's interesting. Talking at cross purposes here. That didn't clobber the file. That did append to the file. So if we try and clobber the file again, but this time we put a pipe symbol there, it's been clobbered. And I've lost what was in my file. Actually, I can get it back very easily if I take the text that was in it there, copy it. Here I can echo the text. If I echo the text and write it to the file, obviously that won't work, but it will if I put a pipe in there. And then old file is back as it was. To turn it off, what you do is you use +O, and you can use set -O to look at the set options. The ones that are usually on, sometimes I turn on Xtrace, which is -X, and verbose, which is -V, if I'm trying to debug a script or a command. You also, if you're using certain shells, you can edit the command line if you set VI on, but that's difficult to use. Right, so that's the end of this section of the course. I hope you enjoyed it. Let's go back to do buy me a coffee if you enjoyed it. If you don't want to buy me a coffee, that's fine, but clicking on like or putting a single word comment on is easy. Subscribing to the YouTube channel, these things would really help me build the channel. And if you want to use iDrive or Dropbox, I know I said I'd show you them, but I really haven't got time. What I'll do them at the beginning of the next section, and I intend to post sections now on a Friday, I think, because I noticed a lot of people looked at the last section at the weekend, so maybe then would be a good time to do it. So when we come back, it will be directory commands, and between now and Friday I'll be posting how to install and configure Mint. But that's the end for now, so bye bye for now.